You can start. Happy evening to all of you. Thanks for sparing your thunderous Thursday to be amidst us. Welcome to today's meeting on CA profession and ethics. We have with us CA Ganesh Balakrishnan sir to deal with this topic. On behalf of Office of SIRC of ICAI, we welcome you, sir. We have also with us CAP Satishan sir, the only regional council member representing the entire state of Kerala. He is the immediate past chairman of SICASA, and presently Satishan sir is the chairman of Committee on Direct Taxes and International Taxation of SIRC of ICAI. He is also the chairman of Research and Exposure Drafts Committee of SIRC of ICAI. We welcome you, sir. Let's start today's program with the invocation of ICAI motto song as a mark of respect to our mother institute.
येष सुप्तेषु जागृति येष सुप्तेषु जागृति कामं 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 कामपुरुषो पुरुषो निर्विमाणः निर्विमाणः तदेव शुक्रं तद्ब्रह्मा तद्ब्रह्मा तदेवामृतमुच्यते तस्मिन् लोकः शतः सर्वे तदूनात्यपि कश्चन एतद्वैता
Thank you. May I now request CA Satishan sir to deliver his welcome address.
Hey, respected today's faculty, Ganesh Balakrishnan sir, and SIRC Assistant Secretary sir, and my dear colleagues, very warm welcome to all of you. Today we are going to have a very important program as CA profession and ethics. All of you know that today's newspaper also having some news regarding our deficiency in ethics matter. So now the integrity, objectivity, professional competency, and confidentiality and professional behavior all are very important now. And I'm sure that Ganesh Balakrishnan sir, like a person having a very good knowledge in professional ethics as well as in audit assurance standard. I had so many, I'm lucky to have so many sessions of him. I'm sure that all of our members will be benefited out of this today's session. And we have a good interaction with the questions regarding your doubts and thing after the session. And as our immediate past president also informed, just we are discussing the same thing. What is the meaning of ICAI? He informed that all the letters of ICAI is related to ethics, because I is integrity, C is competency, and A is accountability, and I is independency. So that is ICAI. And another thing is his version, or all of us know that I am I in the ICAI. That should be our motto. That should be our version. So with this small remark of this subject, I welcome our friend Ganesh Balakrishnan sir to deliver his wisdom and inform the members a very interactive session. And the members should also take this as a serious matter, because as you know, everyone everywhere the complaint regarding the CA or the community of the government side very much relevant for the code of conduct and our ethics. So I welcome once again Balakrishnan sir, and the floor is open, sir. And before that, I welcome our incoming Rahman to introduce Balakrishnan sir to the members for their good knowledge. So once again, thank you for giving this opportunity and welcome Ganesh sir.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Satish sir. You have set a good start for today's program with your welcome address. It's my privilege to introduce Ganesh Balakrishnan sir. Ganesh Balakrishnan is the partner at Deloitte Haskins and Sells Hyderabad office and is in the audit and assurance practice with 3 decades of experience. He was talent and learning and development for the South Asia cluster for Deloitte audit function from 2019 to till date. He is the co-opted member of the Auditing and Assurance Standard Board of ICAI for the year 2023-24. Ganesh sir is a part of the IFRS faculty with our ICAI Institute for all our in-house and open house programs and serves as a faculty for Dun & Bradstreet for their program on IFRS and US GAAP. He is associated with the Financial Reporting Review Board, FRRB, Peer Review Board and a Quality Review Board set up by ICAI, the Indian accounting regulator on technical reviews of accounting firms. He is the regular faculty of the Board of Studies of ICAI for their in-house and open house programs for CA students. He is presently associated with the Dr. B.R. Ambedkar College and Bhavan's Vivekananda College for review of syllabus in accounts and commerce. He has undertaken IFRS training for the Osmania University faculties. He is an external member to the school board of the School of Management Studies of the University of Hyderabad as well. He has presented papers in various forums in India and internationally at universities and other professional bodies on the impact of technology on the future of accounting, US GAAP and IFRS. Ganesh is also a motivational speaker and speaks regularly at UGC HRDC of Osmania University, Women's College of Osmania University and other colleges or the universities in India and abroad. He graduated from Osmania University and is a fellow member of our institute and a cost accountant as well. He is also a certified public accountant, CPA from the American Institute of CPAs. That's the brief profile of a CA Ganesh Balakrishnan sir. Sir, I'm a fan of your WhatsApp status as well. Sir daily used to motivate people through his WhatsApp status. Even today, his WhatsApp status states that when someone comes looking for the older version of you, making you angry or pulling triggers to upset you, and if they cannot find the same old you, that means you have healed and achieved nirvana. Easy said than in practice on a blessed Thursday. Yes, sir. We have a blessed Thursday today. Not only Thursday, all the days ahead are blessed days. With that positive note, leaving the screen space to CA Ganesh Balakrishnan sir to take us through CA profession and ethics. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Rahman. Thank you very much. And thank you, Satish sir. And I really appreciate the time. And I think, let me set the context. And this is very important for people who have joined in this evening. I think if you are following the institute, which has been very proactive, and I would really commend the present leadership of the ICAI, the Central Council, who have been very proactive. Given that there are a lot of changes that's coming through the regulations, the regulators are looking at you, not only in India, but also outside. One of the key changes that came through is, on the CPERs itself. Now, if you today were to look at, we used to have a block of 3 years where we need to have that achieve that 120 hours. Now, from this year onwards, effective 1st of January 2023, all of the CPRs of 40 has to be done within this period, and of which 20 hours are mandatory, where you need to go and attend live sessions, of which mandatorily you need to attend 2 hours on ethics and 2 hours on auditing. This is mandatory. And I think, we have been having auditing sessions, we have been having ethics sessions, we have been having various sessions. But people have not really got through this whole idea as we are sitting with an act, a CA Act of 1949, which actually published the ethics, the professional ethics. We are there for so many decades. Today, the regulators have to come back and tell us, listen, you need to change. You need to report on fraud. You need to not do certain things. You cannot do management services. You need to report on non-compliance laws and regulations. Why would you need a regulator to come and tell, listen, you need to do all what is it? So I think what's important for each one of us to understand and appreciate is we need to start implementing what is already available with us. And I think that is what is going to be the whole idea of, taking you down the memory lane of what changed from an ethics perspective. And I think this is very important, not only for us, but also for people who are joining us. I mean, in fact, if you see, many of the students are coming through it. And I think with the change in syllabus, you're going to see a lot of other things that are going to come in place. But let me talk about it. The moment I saw the topic called CA profession and ethics, I think it's a very apt subject, because today we are in a crossroad of where we are trying. Ethics is always a dilemma. What is right and what is appropriate? Unfortunately, we always sit in a judgment of saying that maybe it is right. Ethically may not be as per the rule, but I'm right. For instance, let me give an example. You're riding a two-wheeler or four-wheeler, and you're rushing towards the airport, and you have to catch a flight, and there has been certain incident. Either you got delayed because of your own self, or by the car driver did not come on time. And you see the red light at different places, junctions, traffic junctions. The question is, you are in the morning, 6 o'clock. There is no traffic either way. Are you going to say, listen, this is what my rule says, I'm ethically right, I should stop at every signal? Or I may take a call, listen, either side there's no traffic. What's the point in wasting my time and just zoom past through it? This is the dilemma that we deal day in, day out when we talk about ethics. We can send n number of policies, right? N number of policies, share n number of literatures surrounding this ethics. But what is important for all of us to understand and appreciate is, do we practice this? I think the day we start practicing this, I think we are there. Today, if you see, there are so many changes that are coming through. The AQMM, the Audit Quality Maturity Model, also talks about quality, also talks about ethics, also talks about everything. The ISQM, which talks about standards on quality, international standards on quality, also talks about ethics. Now, when everybody talks about ethics, everybody talks about integrity, everyone talks about doing the right thing. If everyone does right thing at the same time, then we should not have any issues. But if you see of late, NEFRA has been issuing reports on a weekly basis. Something or the other is keeping coming, and you will continue to see such information in years to come. Is it the right time? The ICAI said it's the right time for us to go back to all our members, whether they are practicing, whether they are in service, whatever they are, that they should go back and relook at what ethics is all. And today's session basically is not to educate you, but to provide you an overview and understanding as to what has changed. As I said, when you deal with ethics, we're always taught in the moral science in our school days, right? We're always told this is what is right, this is what is not right. We all talked about moral principles. But the same thing is expected when you're dealing as a professional, because the responsibility as a professional is far more, because your signature is actually given a lot of weightage. Let's say if you've signed off an audit report, your signature on the audit report carries a lot of trust by various stakeholders, right from the bank to the regulators, to anybody, that someone has looked at this and someone believes that the information that has been furnished or prepared and submitted are true and correct. While we would debate on true and fair, but the true and correct is what the recipient looks at it. And this is exactly where today of late, many of the regulators, many of the stakeholders say auditors are not doing enough. We may talk about fraud, we may talk about checklists, we may talk about discussions. But trust me, the saying is, so much of things you might be aware of which is happening in the company, which you believe, the example that I talked about, standing near a traffic island, is maybe this is within the law. I think this is where we need to start re-looking at, are we doing enough to build trust with various stakeholders? And this is basic. And even take our reports. If anybody reads our report, in the audit report we write, we have complied with the ethical requirements as issued by ICAI. We write there. We write that these financial statements are free from any material misstatement due to fraud or error. Now look at all of these, what we write, what we sign. We say we have complied with all ethical principles issued by the Auditing Standards Board, and compare ourselves when we conduct an audit. Are we doing enough? And I think there is this trust which has gone down between the CA professional as well as the stakeholders. And it's time for us to reestablish, go back to the boardroom, go back to the drawing board and say, listen, are we doing enough to address, to reduce the mistrust that we have with the various stakeholders? And therefore, professional ethics is a starting point for all of us to demonstrate that behavior which is expected from a professional. And I think this is a very, very important aspect of it. It's very, very important. How important is ethics in today's society? It's very, very important. If your report, if you are the professional, you have got the standing, you've got the authority under the Act to sign a financial statement, it is expected that you command that respect and confidence, and therefore ethics plays a major role. As I said, 1949 Act did talk about it. I'll touch upon some of those aspects. But with technology changing, with so many things, where the social media, we need to do more. But are we doing enough? The answer is no. But are we there? The answer is yes. So therefore, from an ethics perspective today, in today's world, you may have this price-sensitive information which gets passed on. You may have WhatsApp where you share among the team about how the financials are going through. Look at all of these. Maybe someone else is using a mobile phone for their own advantage. The law so far is not so much stringent in India, but elsewhere it is much more stringent when you provide insider information. So the ethics plays a very important role to bring back that confidence with the regulators and public at large. What are we talking about? And I'll take you through the journey of Code of Ethics, which has been there. It's been there for long. And whereas when is that it really assumed significance and importance? It's not earlier than 2019. That's where everybody started talking about this ethics. Everybody talks about the dilemma. Everyone talks about the compliances. And we'll touch upon some of those aspects of it. But a Code of Ethics was there as a part of the ethical principles under the Standards on Quality Control 1, SQC1, which talked about one of the objectives of to have the ethical principles in place, or the ethical standards in place, which basically brings about, how do you regulate? What's your relationship with the chartered accountants? What's your relationship? How do you accept and continue with a client? How is the relationship between employer and employee? How is the training that goes through it? How do you ensure independence? How do you ensure various aspects of it? There's no conflict. Professional due care, professional script, various things are written there as part of the SQC. And if you see the reports, both from the QRB and the FRRB and the peer review, you'll find many of the firms are still at a very long distance complying to the SQC. I think this is where we need to start focusing on the ethics itself. Now, as I said, Institute has been in the forefront, and they have been doing it day in, day out. They are trying to see the speed at which they are working. And in fact, if you really look at it, the changes that are coming through are really innovative. They are actually path-breaking. And I think some of things which you will continue to see, including the change in syllabus that has come through, to keep in line with the change in the businesses, the way it is done today. So therefore, Code of Ethics has been one of the forefront for the ICAI. They have been running these sessions for long, but now they said, listen, you have to follow this on a yearly basis, at least 2 hours, go through this Bible called the Code of Ethics. And I think That's very, very critical. I'll touch upon some of the aspects because this code of ethics, basically, when it got published the year 1963, it's undergone like about 12 editions. This is the 12th edition, which is 2019. For about 10 years, there was no change, but now suddenly it has got traction, and that's where the whole changes, and we are talking about it. Now, anything and everything that we do today, whether it's CI for the India standards, whether we talk about, even our own company law is from the UK law, and any changes in the auditing standards, again, is from the IASB, IASB. Now, if you look at all of these, everything comes from what is followed globally. So the International Ethical Standards Boards of Accountants, had modified a lot of changes that's come up through. And one of the changes that has been adapted to make sure that the Indian law, as far as the ethics are concerned, are compliant globally. Since we issue audit report under the equivalent of IFRS standards, we cannot be following certain standards which are not of international acceptance, whether it's our international accounting and auditing standard, auditing and accounting standards, or accounting standards, or ethical standards, whatever it is. All of these has to be of those which are accepted across globes. And therefore, this is very important for us to understand. There are certain things which ISBA follows in terms of the code of ethics. There are certain things which we made adaptation towards our own domestic laws. We'll talk about all of these, but there are changes in the definition between what was chartered accountant to moving to a professional accountant. Now, this code is applicable not only for the professional accountants in practice, this is also applicable for those professional accountants in service. There has been certain dilutions, there have been certain amendments that has been brought in to only focus on listed companies having a turnover of more than 250 crores. But nevertheless, this will become applicable to various people at some point in time. Today, it's more applicable to those professional accountants who are in decision making, who are the key decision makers. So therefore, when we start looking at it, this code of ethics is not only for professional accountants in practice, but it's also for those people who are in service. So therefore, business and service have been included as a part of the revision. Now, if you were to see between 2009 and 2019, during this period, our Companies Act has undergone change, auditing and accounting standards have undergone change. There have been significant revisions in terms of the CA regulations. Council guidelines have undergone change. So there have been significant changes in the code of ethics. And therefore, when we start looking and focusing on this aspect, at the moment, any law, you can apply holistically to everyone. But how do you monitor? How do you administer? And therefore, there have been carve-outs to identify, let's look at those public interest entities. So there's a definition, new definition of public interest entity that has been brought. There have been concepts, this is a very sensitive subject on taxation. What is taxation services to audit clients? If you see, majority of our profession or professionals focus more on tax than on audit. Audit is just a resultant of the taxation service that we provide. Now, today, if you say that for audit, you can't provide taxation service, and majority of the professionals who actually render tax services will have difficulties, and therefore there has been certain carve-outs that have been brought in. But trust me, this is temporary. You might find next couple of years some incidents comes through. You might have this incident where if you provide audit services, you cannot provide taxation service, and that's not far up. The other aspect of it which has been brought in and which is very important, which we have not understood, whilst there is this section on auditing standard that talks about compliance to laws and regulations. Even in our audit report, we talk about compliance to other legal reporting requirements. Have we really looked at this non-compliance to laws and regulations? Somebody might say, we are only financial accountants. We are not supposed to know about laws and regulations. We rely on company secretary certifications. We rely on legal counsel certifications, we rely on various consultants, and therefore we may not have that domain expertise, so we may not know. But just think through this. Take a tour of any of your clients. Let's say it's a manufacturing client. Take a tour of your client to see what are the laws and regulations applicable to this client. So it's very easy. Let's say if I'm a chartered accountant, predominantly provide services for setting up a company, complying to various laws and regulations. You will have a host of laws and regulations that has to be complied, right? It's the Factories Act, Minimum Wages Act, Payments of Gratuities Act, Bonus Act. Take N number. There are various laws that gets applicable. Now, the question is, when you go to a client, and when you go, let's say it's a manufacturing client, the first and foremost things, you need to look at how many people are there, what's the factory, what's nature, whether they have a license, whether they have a capacity to produce, whether they have got registrations, whether they're following the. So these are minimum thing, a pollution certificate. Now, these are minimum things that you may probably know that. They have to maintain a minimum wages register. They need to maintain the contract labor register. These are minimum things that we may be aware of, but probably we may not pay attention to this. Now, just think through this. Today, non-compliance laws and regulations have got far-reaching implications. Today, you talk about bribery. Today, you talk about fraud. Today, you talk about non-compliance. But just think through this. If you were to see some of the recent reports issued by NEFRA, that's a great eye-opener for all of us. We believed what is right is what we think, but we need to open that lid. I don't say open the corporate wheel, open the lid to see whether there are crabs, there are water, there are oil, what is it? Just don't go and see from the outer layer surface saying that maybe this is a liquid which is got full with petroleum products and highly inflammable. No, you are supposed to know the business. So therefore, non-compliance to laws and regulations becomes a significant aspect of it going forward. And therefore, we need to start focusing on all of this. And I'll touch upon section 260 and 360 of the Act. Now, if you were to look at the revised Code of Ethics, which came into effectively from 1st of July 2020, there was this carve-outs for 3, responding to non-compliance of laws, fee relative size, taxation. All of these are now applicable 1st of October 2020. So in other words, there is some sort of a carve-outs that have been brought on. I will touch upon each one of them, but these are all applicable. It is, as I said, it is very difficult to monitor, administer and monitor, but it's easier to help people understand, adapt what the changes are coming through. And therefore, at some point in time, you can make the rest of the laws compliant with everything. So now if you look at some of those aspects, what change, and let me touch upon some of this. When I talk about existing provisions, we are talking about these provisions which had this specific in the Code of Ethics, which when was originally announced, they said if the fee from any audit client represent more than 15% of the total fee, right? Now, this is what is called an interest. So you can fall under a familiarity threat, you can call an intimidation threat, it could be anything else, because many of the practicing professionals coming from the two-tier or three-tier cities, and if you look at majority of them, they may be having one client, which is actually their entire livelihood. Now you want to tell them, listen, forget about this, you cannot have this so much of this thing, please divert this, diversify your portfolio, get back anything. Who is going to provide this? Now, this is going to be a significant issue, and it's an issue. It's an ethical dilemma. And that is where now 15% went for non-public. So there's a distinction that was made between a public interest entity and non-public interest entity, and that's where it got increased to 40%. Okay, fair enough. Let it not be 100%, let it be below 40%. And therefore, this is a much greater thing to say, hey, listen, move from concentrating to one client, because what happens The moment you get only one client and you're servicing the entire client group, whatever the client says, you need to follow. So the question of complying to ethical standards, your principles will just go haywire because this client says, you have to do it. I don't know how you will do it. And this is where your independence gets impaired or where you get conflicted because between something where you would want to do versus what you cannot do. And therefore, the importance of the professional fee has been brought in. Today, if you look at it compared to when you started your practice in the 80s and 90s and 2000, today, the avenues for practice is actually enlarged with the advancement of technology. And therefore, for every professional, whether it's in 2-tier, 3-tier, sole proprietor, start looking at various other avenues to see that your fees does not constitute significant. The other aspect of it, if you are a practice whose fees is not, earlier it was 5 lakhs, initially when the code of ethics was introduced, it was 5 lakhs. Now they said, no, 5 lakhs is too less, right? So they moved it to 20 lakhs. It's still good because 20 lakhs for a proprietary firm. And if you look 1.5 lakhs and assuming that his cost is, let's say about 30% is his cost, still he will make good money if he's in a tier 2, tier 3 cities. And therefore, this may not be, this is not applicable. And this is a very important step. You know, you need to see when you are, that's why I said, when ICAI looks at it both from how do you administer, how do you expect acceptability, and how it also ensures that this gets implemented and accepted in the long run. And I think this is the right approach with the ICAI sector. The next one was exemptions from applicability provision in case of audit of government companies. They've added now regulators. So therefore, you excluded in the fees, you excluded this aspect of it. If you had a fees which has concentration, you go back to the audit committee and tell them, listen, my fees is greater than 40%. But the audit committee would say, hey, listen, I don't want you guys to be doing this. I want you to do. So therefore, now it moved from those charged with governance disclosure to disclosure to the institute. Just these are all some things which are only temporary, but I'm telling you, down the line, a couple of years, you may have to go back into much more governance. So at this moment, it's only disclosure to the institute, not to anybody else. Now, one other aspect of it, because of the introduction, earlier we used to be called as chartered accountants in the definition which was given in ethics in the chartered accountants. Now, with the code of ethics, from a chartered accountant, we have moved to professional accountants. Earlier, NOCLA, when it originally was, envisaged to be implemented from 1st of July 2020, said this professional accountants in entire employees of all listed companies. They covered the whole horizon of people to be covered. And it's very difficult because there are matters which has to go step by step to the ultimate, those charged with governance. And it is very difficult to monitor. And therefore, senior professional accountant in service has been brought in. Professional accountant is one, but they brought in the definition of senior only to identify people who are involved in decision making, who are employed, who are involved in, ensuring controls are in place, who are involved in various aspects of it. It's rightly so, because only those decision makers or those people who are involved in any of such maintaining of the such controls should be the person who should be responsible for this. And this is applicable to all the listed companies. There's a threshold which talks about net worth and applicable to audit engagement, especially more than 250 crores. So in other words, it says if you're, the Ind AS, which is a normal Ind AS, and the greater than Ind AS is basically, that's a distinction they brought in. But under the Ind AS, if all listed companies is applicable, but in case of the code of ethics, it is only applicable for greater than 250. But just bear in mind, you may be handling audits of greater than 500 crores also. And therefore, it becomes very, very, whilst you might say this may not be applicable for your under the net worth below 250 crores, I may not want to do it, but you cannot have pick and choose policies if you've got companies which you actually are associated with and sign off as a firm for more than 250 crores, and you have such clients. You cannot make a distinction between 250 crores and greater than, and you should ensure the uniformity in application of this particular principle. And therefore, you need to educate to all the professionals, every employee who are working there in these companies, to bring back and bring that awareness, saying that, listen, whilst this may not be applicable to you as a company, but it's important that it becomes very, very mandatory for you to ensure that this is compliant with. Audit engagement, its definition has been brought in. I will talk about a key audit partner which has been introduced in this definition. I'll give you with an example as to why this is very, very important. Applicable to all employees of listed entities, senior professional accountants only service has gone down, and therefore earlier there was a breach. Now it has been repealed. So therefore they said year one, let's make sure we will not get into where it is. For taxation services, they have now made sure that they have only included these disputes in the court, not at the tribunal, because if you really look at it, majority of the professionals in India are tax practitioner professionals. It could be direct, it could be indirect, it could be indirect, it could be international, it could be anything else. But majority of them go through this. Somebody might say, listen, audit is the one. There are hardly few firms which concentrate mostly only on audit. There are many firms which concentrate on assurance engagements, many firms which looks based on this risk appetite and the competency of the people may follow certain things relating to taxation. So therefore, for the limited purpose of taxation service, at this point in time, it's only relates to court, not to any practices that you do it as part of the tribunal. Now, these are things, it is only to just to get you an understanding as to what has changed. Now, more and more, the firms, network firms, individuals, all of these, you need to start educating, you need to start communicating. This is a very important aspect. If it is not about, I may say I'm a member of this firm and therefore I comply to this. I need to ensure that I comply to the whatever the association that I have with the network firm. Plus, in addition to this, if there are certain matters related to the local laws and regulation compliances, you need to still comply. You need to educate both the firm as well as the network firm. And this is a very, very important aspect. There is also a certain important aspect to help certain professionals. In case of an unintentional breach of independent standards, for instance, you may have a situation wherein certain companies, certain firms would have been appointed as the statutory auditor of the entity. You would have come at a later point in time, you would have come across that saying that somebody has taken a loan, someone has done this, someone has done. So wherever there's an unintentional breach, and if you inform that in unintentional breach within the time frame, that is not supposed to be considered as non-compliant. So there are certain leeways, but you cannot be that at the time of accepting unintentional is one, but if you have not verified, merely because without verifying, saying it's an unintentional, we never thought, it's only unintentional is expected to be a rare phenomenon rather than a rule. So unintentional is not is going to help for those people who had all that information. They could have still evaluated before accepting the audit as for attest function, before accepting whether there have been any conflict. And if they don't do it, then they'll result into non-compliance. So therefore, this is extremely rare. Rare is one. Under extremely rare circumstances, if I were to borrow the word from the Ind AS 1 or IAS 1, under exceptionally rare circumstances, if you had an unintentional breach of independent standards, probably you could be given there. Probably I may not be aware. Let's say there's a network firm, I do not have so much of information. I write to them, I come to know later, only under those circumstances that you need to be very, very clear. The independence both for audit and review and other assurance engagements have been differentiated more or less. Whether it's a gifts, whether it's a conflict of interest, everything is defined. But just to help people who are practicing attest functions, people who are practicing assurance engagements, this code of ethics has been predominantly brought in. Now, one of the key changes between 2009 and 2019 talked about non-compliance of laws and regulations. There was earlier no provision, there is provision now. Restrictions on taxation services. Now, prohibition on taxation to audit services, tax preparation is no threat. Tax calculations could be, tax planning could be, but you need to work around to see it does not fall under that. Prohibition of management responsible for audit clients. This is assumed you cannot, if you are doing an audit of a client, you cannot assume the management responsibility. For all those professionals, all those practicing firms, which are into 2-tier and 3-tier, where predominantly the knowledge dissemination with the clients, with their understanding of accounting standards, their understanding of preparation of financial statements is way distant. You may probably play the role of helping them prepare or guiding them prepare, but please do not accept the responsibility of the management, because tomorrow what happens, anything goes wrong, they say, sir, we do not know, sir, only the auditor only told us to prepare. It's the auditors, in the registers, everything is an auditor's office, so only the auditor will know anything else. I think we need to start moving away from this, because in our audit report, we clearly define what's the management responsibility. We also define our audit responsibility. Therefore, when you look at this management responsibility for an audit client, you may guide them. You may help them in terms of saying that where they need to do it, but you cannot own the responsibility. Restriction on fee, I talked about, both for a PI and non-PI, 40%, 20%, but there's a change. Unconditional breach of standards, where he evaluates and then principle, this is where I said in extremely rare circumstances we can do it. Independence requirements, again, it's all driven from the SQC, the ISQM, all of these, which now today talks, as we go along to ISQM, it's more like a similar way where we had these controls defined under the ICOFAR, under the Companies Act. ISQM also will get into the same model. And that is where we need to be ensuring this independence is a very critical aspect. How do we evaluate? And if you see many of the reports, independence is not about taking a declaration. Independence is more beyond a declaration. You cannot have a business. You cannot trade with this. You cannot have partnership. You cannot have somebody with a very, very significant position in that entity. In fact, if you were to look at it, I will touch upon some of those where, familiarity threat and all of those things which comes to it, or the advocacy threat. For instance, let's say one of your clients, let's say, has got, for instance, a restaurant, right? You can't go back and tell everybody there's a great restaurant, you can do it, I can get you a discount, this is what it is. You cannot be advocating your own clients. Or let's say you're auditing certain consumer durables, or you're doing some trading, or you're doing anything else. You cannot go back and tell people, listen, I can help you get you these things. This advocacy threats all becomes very, very important when we start focusing on independence. And independence is the state of mind. Independent and mind with actions, and actions is what drives this. Changes in advertisement guidelines and counsel, and this is something still I'm not able to understand. In social media, so let's take one example, let's say in a Facebook, right? Today you say you can't do in TV, you can't do in newspaper, you can't do in vernacular, you can't do any of those published things. You can only do it in ICAI journal, you can do it in institute. Take the case of Facebook. First of all, you host that we are inaugurating our office. Second, you put a photograph saying that, we had this chief minister, or minister coming, this guy coming, police commissioner coming. You say so many people are coming inaugurated. The question then, have we outlived this advertisement? With a change in technology, with a change in the reach. Take, for example, how many people see the reels in Instagram? Motivational, 30 seconds, talk about the CA, talk about the services, talk about how we have done in a client, make an analysis of our financial statements. You see n number of people, professionals, start doing this with their names, with their from the firm and the phone number. Should we not relook at this guidelines? While somebody might say, listen, this might give undue credit to various people, but today, let's see, we take the fact. This advertisement has been there in the media, somebody inaugurating, someone doing this, someone doing this. Somewhere we need to bring in, but there are still restrictions. You can't go through you cannot advertise, you can't send, you can't go back and say, these are the services that you provide. Still, there are restrictions, but we need to, and this is one of my discussions with some of the members saying that, have we outlived this advertisement guidelines? And we look at this. Now, let's look at some of the very important aspect of it called the key audit partner, right? We all know, right, under the SQC, right, you cannot have a partner for X number of years, more than 7 years on a listed engagements. Now, if you see majority of the firms in India, right, the large Indian firms in India are actually driven from what is called, grandfathered process, or from a legacy perspective, grandfather, father, son, or big names and all of this. Now, today, when you go and do an audit, you may not be signing that financial statement, but anything and everything has to be consulted with that partner before you sign. So the definition of key audit partner, apart from, we only know engagement partner, the definition of a key audit partner has now assumed importance. The role of that individuals were involved, were sitting in the boardroom, discussing with the team, saying, please tell us, sir, what you based on your experience, and you are a part of the discussions. Then they will fall under the definition of key audit partner. Why this is very, very important is, if there are planning meetings, if there are discussions with the clients, you cannot, if you list down the name of that person, even though under the SQC you're not supposed to be involved in that, the moment you include that person, it will be a breach of that standard and you'll be non-compliant to the ethics. So therefore, for all those professionals who are doing it, and which happens, it's quite happens because we always take the senior most professional with us to be a guiding factor during these discussions. And therefore, this key audit partner is also now, apart from the engagement partner, apart from the engagement quality reviewer, control reviewer, he would be included as a part of the discussion. That's all you need to be very, very careful when you start doing your documentation, when you're involved in discussions and all of this. This particular aspect had to be looked at it more closely. The Code of Ethics also defined the public interest entity as an listed entity or defined by the regulators using, could be a public money, could be a borrowing, could be by the RBI, could be insurance, could be anybody else. All of that, anything that involves public, could be banks through a borrowing or listed through this, or a listed, an equity listed or a debt listed, or let's say you're raising finance through private placements. And if there is interest that are involved, those is what you need to be very, very careful about. So therefore, public interest entity assumes significant importance because the harm to the society or the damage to the economy or the financial system in the economy is not much for the unlisted small, medium enterprises, but it's much larger where public interests are involved. And that's the reason why this assumes significant importance. ICAI, as I said, ICAI is nothing but the International Ethical Standard Boards of Accountants, and basically talked about definition of professional accountant. Now, chartered accountant is replaced now with the definition of professional accountants. Now, if you look at the Code of Ethics, it's divided between Volume 1, Volume 2, and Volume 3. We talk about disciplinary cases in Volume 3, basically some of the cases which many of you would be aware of. I'll touch upon some of the cases which are ongoing. Domestic provisions, the Volume 2 is basically, we talk about the auditing standards, the accounting standards, the guidelines, the Companies Act, the various acts that gets issued, the principles on which ISBA code has been applied on 2018. And this is where you need to be very, very mindful. There are certain provisions between the provision sections 100 to 199 predominantly is applicable to every professional, whether it's in service, whether it's in business or in practice. There are certain provisions from 200 which is applicable only to those people who are in business, and there are certain things which are applicable to those people who are in service. There are independence compliances which needs to be done. That's a separate section that we deals with 400, and also includes the section 260 and 360, which defines on no class. So there are various aspects of it, but just for an understanding, this ISBA code is applicable to one in practice, any case was. Now it is in service. So therefore you need to understand, educate all those people, especially in those of your clients which are listed, that this code is applicable. And the beauty about all of this person should be a person who should be who should have been registered with the ICAI or should have passed. If he's a cost accountant, this may not be applicable, but if he's a chartered accountant, then it would be applicable. So therefore, you need to look at that specific aspect of it when it comes to applicability. So when you look at parts, part 1 talks about codes, fundamental principles, conceptual framework applicable to every accountant, whether in service or in business. Whereas part 2 talks about business, which are people in, and part 3 talks about in practice. And there are international independence standards, which is 400 to 89 talks about independence for audits and independence for other assurance. So for 4A and 4B, that's how the international independence talks about. So let's look at the first volume, right? The volume which is applicable to every one of us, whether we are in business, whether we are in practice, it's applicable to everyone. Now, they have to comply with this code, right? And when they talk about, all those, if you've learned from the SQC, whether it's your integrity, whether it's your objectivity, whether it's a competence and due care, whether it's a confidentiality, whether it's the professional behavior, all of these have to be complied with, right? Every person is expected to be honest in every of the relationship or the work they do it. There should be very less biases. There should be very less in terms of conflicts. They should always make sure that they are upgraded on a regular basis. They attain their professional knowledge and skills. They should always maintain confidential information. They should not be involved in any of this insider trading and all of that. And they should ensure that they comply with relevant laws. This is a very simple application. It's a very simple rule that has been brought in as a part of the fundamental principles. But when it comes to application, it is the universe. It's comprehensive. That means it covers the whole universe of the transaction of the business as one does it. And therefore, you are the epicenter as a professional accountant in practice or a professional accountant in business or service. So this is very, very important. The integrity, the objectivity, professional due care, confidentiality, and professional behavior. And each one of this you need to identify. So you might go back to your client and then say, hey, let's understand how do you evaluate. You may not have conversation in the past. You need to start having conversation now. How do you ensure? Let me give you one example. We all believe, we go with what is called as a biases. We always have this bias of where we go to a client and say, this client can't do anything wrong. I can tell you this client is 100% right. Now, have you any time gone back and asked a client, why do you select only this banker for placing deposits or borrowing from this? Why do you only rely on this person to place your investment? Why do you only engage this particular civil contractor to make sure he constructs your building? If you can look at this aspect of it, and this conversation is where we need to start talking about it. Ethics is not, these are things which are written, but do we have this conversation with our clients and say, listen, how do you know that there is no biases, there is no undue favor? You place deposit with this bank, the bank says, no worries, I'll give you a credit loan, a credit to at a discounted price for your housing. How do you know that there's no unjust enrichment by having this model? You might come back and tell me, sir, you're asking going beyond this. Is it relevant? But if I have to apply the principle of ethics, the integrity, should I not ask this relevant questions? Do we know the trend? The trend of why there's certain parties you deal with? Do you know the trend why you would want to route a transaction only with this party? Is there an undue benefit? And this is what we need to start looking at. And therefore, as professionals and as auditors, when we go to the client, we need to start looking at this much more closely and start engaging with them to ask. I'm not saying, while we might talk about professional skepticism, but if we don't go look at these biases, these are called the unconscious biases that you have. And if you don't go and challenge them and get an answer, it's very, very difficult to say whether somebody has done. Why this is important is, look at from a fraud perspective. Majority of the fraud in India happens only through related party transactions or related parties. Whilst related party transaction for heavens in number of years is only a disclosure standard. It is nothing to do with your accounting. It's at best in a transfer pricing, you have an arm's length transaction, but it's never a point of focus to whether at the first place, whether you should you have actually invested in that subsidiary because his son-in-law is now, he got married to us. The child has got married, and therefore in son-in-laws, this in-laws, you parted a part of the property and gave them, and you're transferring profits there. I think this is something where we need to start looking at more closely. So when we have engagement with those professionals in business, start asking this right questions. It is nothing wrong, but put these questions. Put it in the back of his mind to say, hey, listen, probably these auditors are looking at something beyond. Challenge them. Let me share with you one incident. In one of the visits, I don't notice certain things were happening. Right? The company was building up some beautiful infrastructure, saying that, this is very, very beautiful. It's very close to the, our factory. This is very, very nice. People are very happy about it. When you start looking at those transactions and you start looking at, you see the end user, you get really, you start looking, wondering, wow, how the company really thinks about its employees. But look at the flip side. The rentals that they pay, including land as lease as well as the property on that, is recovered within a period of 5 years. Now the question then is this above board transactions? It's a related party. You will have every beautiful structure. You will not fall under the definition of related party. You don't have identifies related party. You don't do anything. You will have a valuation report. You will have this report. You have every other report. But substance or form becomes very, very important. So when you start looking at this, when you engage with these professionals, start looking at this more differently. And that is what will drive behaviors. Now, one of the aspects of this is where it can create a threat to the fundamental principles. FP is nothing but the fundamental principles. And this fundamental principle threat is what I said, use a third-party testing. Exercise your professional judgment. Go beyond books. When the client provides you information, he processes the information, he gives the trial balance, he gives the vouchers, he gives everything. You give your signature. That's all you do. What do? Do you do a third party test? Do you do corroborative? Do you look something beyond? The answer, if the answer is yes, then your conclusion is different. If the answer is no, I sent a confirmation, I received confirmation. I asked for vouchers, I got vouchers. I made a classification, standardized, non-standardized. I did a sampling, I got everything. But if I don't go and check whether the transaction itself is valid or not, I may perform the procedures as an auditor. I may have got everything, because every professional in service or in business or a CFO or an accountant knows how a partner, how a professional will ask questions. There'll be certain people who only look at English. There are certain people who only look at control. Certain people who only look at fixed assets. Certain people only look at. So he will make sure that the person is busy in that, and he will not provide any other information. And this is exactly our bigger challenges. When we see September 30th for many of these companies, which files their financial statements on that day, that is where we start missing out on many of these compliances, and that is where we need to start looking at. So conceptual, when you look at this conceptual framework, look at information, look at changes, look at systems. We talk about audit trail, which is effective 1st of April 2023. Have we understood what trail is? And that's where the conceptual framework talks about. The other aspect of it, self-interest threat, right? Basically, your professional's accountant judgment, right? You might say, you know what? I think this is fair enough. This transaction is over and above. I think it's fair, right? Your behavior, because you say that, and I know this client and that's where it is. Self-review threats, because you already got last year, there's something came back, the client provided information, you're happy with it. Start challenging that. Advocacy threat, familiarity threat, intimidation threat. All of these are there on a day-to-day basis. It may not come to the partner level, it may not come to the director level, it may not come to senior, but these threats are there. We always say, I have a gut feeling this client will not do mistakes. We start in that premise. That is where our self-review threat comes to it. Our advocacy threat, we always go and promote, you will say the best people, they come up with what is called integrated reporting. You come up with the best of the standard. In fact, if you see the failure of banks other than in the other part of the globe, other part of India, they were the best bankers, and it just collapsed in one week. The signals. Are we looking at the signals? Are we hearing the signals, or are we waiting for the shock to take? I think these are some things where we need to start looking at threats. Evaluate threats. I'm not saying that threats is, you might say, I'm a person who's talking because it's easier to talk at 36,000, 48,000, 50,000 feet. You can talk like this. I'm telling you, slowly and steadily, NEFRA is coming back on all companies which are covered under this. A time will happen when they would have covered the entire spectrum of audit professionals and clients. And you will have no different conclusions than the conclusions that is coming as early warning signal. They are called early warning signal. Wake up now before it is too late. So therefore, look at that from that perspective. Don't look at from a law perspective. Don't look at from my discussions, deliberations perspective. Look at from a perspective whether the threat is at an acceptable level. Whether you find ethical behaviors. Let me share with you an ethical behavior issue. Here is a client, was very, very good. He used to take care of people. He used to take care of his team. He used to take care of auditors. You go to the factory, he used to receive you well, treat you well, give you all the information. All he did is he had all the information of the juniors who had his logins, the supervisor's logins, the library logins. He used to go and make changes in the amounts and the account numbers and used to do it. Logged in, junior, supervisor, reviewed it. If there is no change request, approved it, you went through the cycle, beautifully tested, control passed, everything passed. But this man was sitting on a holiday and all of this, where he did all of this. And that came through, not through the testing. That came through because someone found an amount to be same. At the same time, it got posted and they got a trend saying that through an analytical review, they got a trend that why is this transaction happening only on Saturday, Sunday? When the person went and inquired, why is it happening? They said, no, this is not posted money. That's how everything gets involved. So therefore, look at the new information, look at the threats, evaluate these threats, and these threats is what becomes very, very essential. What is essential for all of us? Independence of professional accountants, complying to the independence standards, always having this skepticism, right? Again, skepticism is nothing called, it's not about suspicion. You need to trust everyone, but as an auditor, you need to verify. Professional skepticism is that. Skepticism is not something like, I'm going to find faults with it. No, skepticism is, can this transaction be recorded other than what it should have been recorded, how it has been recorded? Can I look at differently? Rather than saying, oh, this man, I know his behavior, his income is not equivalent to his this thing, he's got cars, he's got houses. That is not what professional skepticism is all about. That's a behavior that we are talking. Skepticism is a way you should look at it is, if I were to look at this transaction in a different lens, will I come to a different conclusion? And that is how you need to start looking at it. Corroborate with external evidence. An evidence which can come back to the same conclusions. And that is what it is. Compliance with fund. So as an important aspect of it for us as a key consideration, make sure we comply to all of this. We talked about conceptual framework, which is applicable to all accountants, both in business and in practice. Now we are talking about section 200 to 270, where we predominantly going to talk about application of conceptual framework, conflict of interest, preparation and presentation of information, acting with sufficient expertise. Just imagine, under section 134 of the Companies Act, it's the responsibility of every the CFO to make sure that he prepares information and reports information which is free from any material mistake and is exercises professional judgment. That is expected of a profession. As a CFO, as a professional accountant, chartered accountant is a professional accountant, is expected to talk about it. He is expected to behave at all levels with honesty and integrity. He should always ensure there is no conflict of interest. And this is where we need to see whether he's acting with sufficient expertise. It cannot be a situation where he would say, hey, listen, this is what I want you to help me out. I want you to prepare this document and share it with me. No. First of all, the bigger challenge that we face today is when you own the client to work, when you say, this is what we want. When we tell the client, say, no, it is our response. I will tell, this is how our firm says. No. We will lead you to a decision which you will understand as to why a particular thing is not appropriate. For instance, why do you believe an impairment is not an impairment? I will not say, no, we will only use risk-weighted average rate. We will use a risk-free return. We will use this bond rate, all this. No. These are the parameters. Please look at this parameter. Within this parameters, you need to apply. And that's how you need to help them with that acting with sufficient expertise. Then what happens is it's between and engaging with a professional which will acting with sufficient expertise. And this is a key requirement in the professional accountants in service. And this is why I'm re-emphasizing this. Many times we always say it is what our firm says. No, this is what the Act says. This is what the application of principles and accounting standards says. And we concur with this, with your view, and that's what drives behavior. Financial interest compensation incentives. Now, this is one aspect of it. I don't know how many of you really look at the MIS information. Now, if you look at a story, I was discussing with one of those entities which had an issue of a going concern. The question came up that he said, listen, this going concern, I'm telling you, this budget is the budget which will be used, and this is the sources of funds is what. You go back to him and say, listen, okay, fine, I understand what you're saying. Can you please help me understand how did you arrive at this budget? What are your supports? He would come back to you and challenge, saying that you're asking beyond this information. So therefore, look at this aspect of it. Are there anything, whether it's used, and you always see many companies talking about EBITDA. Our EBITDA went from 15% to 17%, 17%. They'll come and discuss, sir, no, this year, our management wants to relook at it. We want to change the accounting policy where we can get an EBITDA of 19%. But what we don't realize, if you go back to contractual terms of employment terms, says that anything above 15%, you get a commission of 2%. So the 15 to 19% is what he gets a benefit. That is what we don't do it. Does the CFO manipulate that aspect of it for his own gains? Asking for too much. But I'm just telling you, this is a very important aspect we should solve. Inducements, including gifts and hospitality. Here's a client, we'll take you. Now, let's say, why do you want to, let's go physical verification. We very recently had the banking closures. The branch manager, when you go to the branch manager, they would have issued on 3rd and said 5th, you have to close, no, 7th. Sir, today here is a great temple, sir. We will take you, sir. The great textile, you are in the Coimbatore. It's a beautiful city of textiles. I'll take you to these places. This is a very wonderful place. I'll take you to show yoga. Sir, about information, sir, the information will come to you. Inducements, gifts, hospitality, it'll apply. When you are treated like a king, because especially there are only few places where you're treated like a king. Not every other places you're treated like a king or a son-in-law. Those places, and let's say there are certain transactions which you believe are not above board. You can immediately see the behavior, a nice behavior or threatening behavior. There are only two behaviors. And this inducements becomes very, very important. And we should not be drawn by this. Any expenditure, let's say if you're on your travel, on your any client, or on your meal, anything should be borne by you. And if you have got an arrangement to bill them for that, you should bill them, not accept it. If you're going on an if you're going with a client for everything, you may wish to pay that bill, pick up the bill. So therefore, that's where it is. Responding to NOCLAR, I'll talk about the NOCLAR, pressure to breach the fundamental principles. And this is a very important aspect in service. And these are some things which you need to do it. We hear stories, right? Certain people in drug, in pharmaceutical, get the licenses, they have to pay bribes. There's one aspect you generally hear about. For getting a license, there is a consultant used. We need to be very, very careful when we're dealing with such instances. And again, I'm calling out the reason why I'm calling out all of these, not from a perspective that, something would go wrong. It's only from a perspective if a third party comes and looks at your file or asks you questions, you get that answer, you get to that conclusion, what the questioner or the interviewer is asking. That is what you need to start looking at it. Again, you might say, sir, I may have 100 clients, 150, it's not possible. The point is, this is applicable or a threshold. But I'm saying if you follow a practice, this becomes much more easier. Let me touch on the NOCLAR. Again, this is applicable from effective 1st of October 2022. Now, compliance to various laws and regulations. Let me touch upon this, both for practice and both for business. When you come across both an acts of omission, commission, intentional, unintentional, committed by the client, those charged with governance, anybody else, you need to first raise this issue. Your first, as a practice, is with those charged with governance. If it is not charged with governance, first with the management, then with those charged with governance, and then with the reporting authority. For the business or the employees, it's first employing organizer senior, then your management, then those charged with governance, and then that's up. That's how it goes through it. But what are the things that you need to talk about? You need to talk about the compliance with the principles of integrity. You need to talk about what are the actions that has to be taken. Let's say there is a certain bribe that has been paid and has come to your attention. You need to escalate it and get that addressed. It may not be reportable under the law. Let's say under the Companies Act, up to a threshold of 1 crore, it may not come under that. But it could be an amount which could be significant. You may probably want to look at that much more to see if there is a failure of a control at that particular level. Not only that, not only is an isolated incident, have you extended beyond in the past, in the future, to make sure that's only an isolatory. These are some things which you need to look at it. This is applicable to the senior the professional accountants, and in practice, it's for those 250 crores. But again, let me tell you, while this is applicable for more than 250 crores in listed, but it's important that it is, I mean, with the changing in definition of the small, medium enterprises, it might still fall under that category. But it's important for us, those in practice, that to be aware of this non-compliances, because a smaller also can lead to a larger issue. Bribery, corruption, fraud, falsification of accounts, insider dealing or trading, financial products and services, data protection and tax evasion, money laundering, environmental protection. Now, if you see very recently, there have been certain companies which have been banned, right? Just look at this, because a forensic audit has been conducted by a SEBI. Just look at the condition of the professional who has actually signed the balance sheet. He went through a process, he went through a particular manner of complying to an auditing accounting standard. Is not, let's assume he has done everything right. It might support, but let's assume for a moment that he has not gone beyond. Questions may be asked. Why I'm telling you is today, the regulators and the regulations are going after auditors only because they want to see that if you tighten the end person, the outcome is your audited financials. If you tighten the auditor, the auditee will automatically get changed. If you don't tighten the auditor, it might escape. And therefore, this is where the whole thought process. Fraud, misstatement of financial statements, you might call this a tax planning, a tax, you might have set up certain thing in the Isle of Man, you would have set up certain companies in Singapore, Mauritius, you have structured, beautifully structured. But if this falls under the definition of the beneficial owner under the Companies Act, we run into an issue. It's the beneficial owner is where you will try to track all of this, and therefore tax evasion, while we may call it as a structure, becomes an issue. Bribery, corruption. Today, if you see very recently in the news, there is one chartered accountant firm was implicated for certain things because there was an issue with the company. He has been put behind bars for some reason. But again, their whole objective of the person who comes in the uniform, he doesn't look at whether you're a chartered accountant, whether you took so much of time to struggle, so much of fightings you did with the client. He says simple, you have not identified fraud, so therefore you go behind bars. Think through this compliance of laws and regulations. I'm telling you, I'm not trying to bring this fear into the people. I'm only trying to say is, look at the larger canvas as to what can go wrong. It's not possible for all of us. It's only that, we keep monitoring this whole process which goes through in our review or an audit of financial statement. That's where we start looking at things differently. When we have new information, please process those new information from there. Look at the number of laws that we need to comply with it. In a compliance to laws of regulations are more than 4,000. And just imagine you're not auditing one company. Let's say there are a host of subsidiaries that they need to do it. Look at the mandate on the CARO 2020. Look at the acts that we need to comply with. This is the knowledge that we need to take and sit with an audit client. we can't say we don't know. We cannot say that, because when we write that dues, no statutory dues are outstanding for more than XXX, we give that statement of fact. We say that not compliant. We say there's no fraud under the CARO. We say their related party transactions are at an arm's length transactions. Look at all of this. We may write that, but if it is not followed by the appropriate audit procedures, or we do not have sufficient appropriate audit evidence, that is where we run into a problem when we are responding to any person. Matters inconsequential, personal misconduct, non-compliance to other than employing. These are things which will not come under NOCLAR, but for NOCLAR, that's very, very important. So what is the response for us in practice? We need to be responsible. For being responsible, we need to be aware. We need to have an understanding of the matter. We need to have that addressed. We need to have this communicated. We need to take actions, and we need to disclose. We can't keep quiet and say we not be responsible to this. We need to do all these steps, and we need to demonstrate in our document. This is called a memo that you need to prepare whenever such non-compliance laws and regulations. Which law? How did you come aware of that law non-compliance? Let's say pollution. You come to aware of pollution because there was a fire safety issue, some fire accident happened, something got burned, and therefore they came back and said this pollution certificate is not valid. Get an understanding. Find out what is the implication. Does it result into shutdown? Does it result into financial implication? Is there payment made? How did you address this matter? What are the facts and circumstances that you gathered? What discussions you had, internal, external? Does this have an impact on your audit report? How significant it is? Is it only a reportable matter? Is it an emphasis on matter? Is it a matter of modification? And what actions you should take? Is it such a magnitude which is pervasive on the engagement? You may have to withdraw from that engagement. Look at from that aspect of it, and appropriate disclosure, whether it's the government officials, whether to your board, CAG, whoever it is. You need to have that appropriate. This response to non-compliances or a suspected compliance is what is very, very critical. Right. The other aspect of it, I'm quite sure many of you would have come across this whistleblower complaint. Whistleblower complaints are a mechanism which basically talks about how do you establish the procedure? How did you establish a procedure? Let's say most of the companies are run by promoters, right? And they have the people at every important level. How do you then identify a whistleblower? You may have a situation where many companies may say they may not come across any whistleblower complaints. Just think through this. How is that a company with such a magnitude will not have a single whistleblower complaint? And this is something which we need to start looking at more closely. Whilst we might say whistleblower is the responsibility of the management, our responsibilities to review whatever has come across during the period in terms of the procedures, to whom was it reported, how was the actions taken, what is the nature of it. If whistleblower was imminent, right, and if whistleblower is taken seriously, many of the frauds will get unearthed. And I'm telling you why. Whispers, and whenever we do an audit, it is not an audit of the entity or the financial statement sitting in a conference room. We need to go back onto the floor, talk to people at various levels, get an understanding of that. Probably you will have much more detailed analysis. Whilst you might say, I might do a data analytical, I might do an AI tool, I can do a Power BI, I can throw out all of these exceptions. I may have a great analytical tool which will show all this exception using an Excel macro. I can get all of this. That's all fine. But those are all recorded. What is not recorded
is when you have conversation with people. When you go onto the shop floor, when you're taking a go and ask them, how does the material come? Go and ask the lowest guy and say, how do you handle this material? What type of material? Do you find any difficulty in doing this? Where do you take the scrap? Where does it get generated? How do you shift from one record to the other? These are some things which you should do. You may not, probably if you are a partner, you're walking in, probably the senior management will come. Use your junior most team to go and do an inquiry of understanding with a senior. Probably you'll get more information. I think this is where whistleblower becomes very, very important. Independence, very, very important. The hallmark of our profession or any profession is the trust, the public trust. The day the public trust gets derailed, that's the time when you find all of these getting compromised. Conceptual framework, I'm not getting into some of them are repeated, but what is important for all of us to understand that make sure that we follow the rules and regulations, whatever is being issued, both in letter and in spirit, and in applying, that's such principles, which ordinarily you believe that it is your own and how you come to a conclusion. Only then when you have that frame of mind that the independence can be established. These again, this is a great subject. I said it's very difficult to go to 2 tiers and 3 tiers. Large firms may not have this issue, but smaller firms do have this issue. And therefore you need to make sure that you do not concentrate on certain clients throughout. You make sure you de-risk your portfolios and make sure that your different clients, which adds to your total fees. Compensation, very, very important aspect of it, because we normally don't look at this compensation. We are very good in calculating managerial remunerations and using section 198 and all of this, but we don't concentrate from a KPI perspective. The key performance indicator, the moment we start focusing on those aspects, it probably our conclusions could be different from mere mathematical calculations that we come under section 198. Independence again gives hospitality, financial interest, breach of independence, how you deal with this. I'm not touching, but these are something which are there. And just make sure, you should not have business relationships. There are no loans. There are no family relationships. You don't take any favors from the client. Be careful, because in today's world, let's say you do the audit of a real estate company. And what happens is saying that in lieu of your fees, I'll give you an apartment. Right? You run into a problem. And therefore, make sure that, you have the wall or this checks and balances when you deal in independence. Again, I'm telling you, the less you talk and the better it is. The more you put in practice, the best it is. Because independence cannot be through letters. Independence cannot be through confirmation. Independence cannot be through any other means, but by applications, by mind, by the way you behave, way you deal with it. And that's very, very essential. These are all standards on auditing. Again, given this with council making mandatory of 2 hours of auditing, 2 hours of ethics, please go through the auditing standards. I'm telling you, the NEFRA is coming down heavily, saying they go to every paragraph. Every paragraph, they look at it and say, please explain to me how did you do it. It's not a checklist driven. It cannot be a checklist driven. It cannot be a tick, 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 yes, no, not applicable. It has to be, what have you done when you said you've done a testing of a confirmation of balance? If you've done a testing of inventory observations and valuations, it has to have the details related to the work paper. And that is what you need to look at standards on auditing. Compliance of accounting standard boards, engagement quality control standards, INDES, AS notified, all of these will form part of the standards on audit on domestic laws. Again, Chartered Accountants Act 1949 defines person in practice. There's a definition. There is a definition of what management services in the Companies Act. There's a definition of an understanding under the CA Act. There is an understanding which is contrary to whatever we believe by the regulators. So we need to make sure that we marry all of this together to make sure that we have seen independent everything that we do. Prohibition on use of directing other than CA. Members who are ICAI can only use ACS, but they cannot use company secretary and cost accountant. You can have multidisciplinary firms with partnership with company secretaries, cost accountants, but you cannot write anything else. Again, these are notified. I'm not getting this. This session is predominantly more driven from an ethics and profession. I'm conscious of the time. I'll just give you time for you to understand. There are certain restrictions even today, as recent as a concurrent auditor cannot be a statutory in the bank. One of the clarifications that was issued by the ICAI, statutory auditor cannot be internal auditor cannot be GST auditor. Anything that you do for management, you cannot be doing an attached function. Again, a cooling period which is of 2 years as directors. Members to satisfy when appointment statutes. All of these under this materiality. Again, materiality is misunderstood. It's not a mathematical calculation that we always look at it. Materiality is also a judgment that you use. What is material could be something which you believe is material, may not be material for somebody who's reviewing it. So therefore, there are a lot of judgments that are used. Somebody might question your judgment, but you need to have a basis as to why certain amounts, certain things are not materially misstated, and using those. When you talk about materiality, always think materiality from the eyes or the ears of the users of the financial statement. Materiality is not what you calculate for use doing an audit. Materiality is as a user, for instance, as a user of financial statement, there was an error of, a valuation or a provisioning, and I did a valuation. Therefore, it resulted into a 200 basis point of EPS not being right. Basis this EPS or a P equity, a P ratio, I invested in this company at an X multiple. Imagine the value of money that he would have lost because of this. So materiality is beyond what we do under standards on it. First schedule to CA Act 1949 basic predominantly talks about a chartered accountant, what you can do, what you cannot do. You cannot have a percentage of fee. It is only permissible at a particular level. You cannot share fees. It is permissible under only at certain things when you have an arrangement. Non-chartered accountants, you cannot share. There are case laws which says, the 50% fee was paid to somebody who was not a CA because he got the business, and therefore, case was filed. He was considered as professional misconduct. Sharing of fees is not provided. These are all something which has been there, but I would request each one of the people who are joined in today or people who will be joined, who will be going through this, or encourage all of your people in your office to go and just read it. Maybe you will get a good sleep. People are missing sleep on those days. Please give them this books because they may start re-looking at it, start understanding, or make it like bits, like, the bytes, not the bits, the bytes. Put it as a screensaver, right? Small bytes, what you can't do. So little where, which is very, very important. You can use it as a screensaver. You can look at it. You cannot secure any services from a person who's not an employee of the chartered accountant firm. You cannot write various letters to officers. And these are all very old cases, but in today's cases is more about anyone and everyone can go and complain. If you issue a certificate which is not compliant, you cannot tender. If it is, chartered accountants can't tender if there is no minimum fee required and no other people are doing it. My ask to all of you is, people who generally do apply for such tendering, let's say whether it's a concurrent audit, whether it is a government audits or anything, today the risk is very high. The risk of compliance is very high. You might say that, fine, I have an insurance, I will have a professional services insurance, those insurance I can take. But the liability insurance is not going to replace the challenges that we'll go through when you're facing such reviews from any third party or a regulator. I think we need to start re-looking at what we are doing it. And today the government, the way they're doing it, and I don't know how many people really are getting that they're actually connecting all of our financial information in such a way that it's very difficult for us to escape from paying any tax. And I'm telling you very clearly, because if you take the AIS information, if you take today information relating to your trips, a lot of these people go on trips, jolly rides, is called the study tour, Europe study tour, Thailand study tour, Vietnam study tour, Dubai study tour. You'd go to every study tour. Now today you're talking about withholding of taxes. Today you're talking about buying properties more than X, you have withholding of taxes. At some point in time, you have your information get captured because you have to file a return. If you don't file a return, that person, the income tax officer, will send a notice. Take a recent notice which has gone. A lot of these people who went on donating to many of the charitable institutions beyond their salaries itself. So you have reported income of 10 lakhs, but you have donated 1 crore. Think through this. Today, the journey with digitization, the journey through ChatGPT, the journey through artificial intelligence, the journey through connecting all your dots, your mobile phone, Paytms, Google Pay, your Google Maps, you name, everything can be captured. All I have to do is just get your number, I get every information. PAN number alignment. Slowly and steadily, they're just bringing everything together. One thing which will connect is your PAN. So therefore, when you're going for a holiday, the guy will say, sir, aapka PAN number dijiye, sir. You please provide your PAN number. That's all. Because withholding taxes. Just think through this, the widening through holidays, through electricity, through various things, credit cards, everything happened. But there are some things which you need to be mindful about it. Advertisement, I'm not a great fan of this. I should not use this forum, but definitely we have outlived this advertisement. Today, social media, you can write anything and everything. Today, I can call my friend. My friends have visited today my beautiful office. I had my client visiting today. We had a great time. That's it. Is it an advertisement? No, it's a social event. It's a social media. FB is a social media. Instagram is social media. But no. But somebody was looking at saying that, oh, wow, you've got a wonderful office. Somebody writes, very good office. Yeah, congratulations for your getting moving to a new office. Just think through these aspects of it. A publication, again, you can write only chartered accountant name. And again, teaching. Restricted more than 25 hours in a week. Again, these are all those people who teach and also go and do what is called as practice. There are certain things where there are cases where people used to teach full time and also used to hold the certificate of practice. There are certain cases which relates to that. Television movie credits, you see a lot of these days, movie theater says chartered accountants and all of this, or in a debate in the TV, you will have chartered accountants and somebody might refer to the firm, something. So it should not result into what is called as an advertisement. So, normally during tax, budgets, you'll have a lot of chartered accountants on the screen. During any of the events, some incident happens, you'll have a lot of chartered accountants on this. So I think we need to be mindful about to what extent is identified as advertisements and what is not identified as advertisements. Congratulations message, and this is exactly a typical case where it was held actually in a high court saying that the advertisement which has been put by the member is a noticeable one, and profession of chartered accountant should maintain high standards of integrity, professional ethics. So just imagine, he was found guilty, but by the council. But again, just look through these observations. So it is not something. I mean, I would say you can debate either way, saying that if you allow advertisement, all the other people will break it. Irrespective of that, you go to LinkedIn, you go to Facebook, you go to any media, advertisements are there. You may not advertise it as a chartered accountant firm, you will have that name. So therefore, I think time that we allow people, we have to allow people. We are equally competent. When ChatGPT, artificial intelligence are taking our work, why can't we use our brand image? I am for that. sorry for using this medium, but that's a personal view. Again, you go back to the, whenever you have these expert advisory committee says the views expressed are the expressed of the individual, the institute no longer takes any responsibility. So therefore it is from that perspective. But having said that, we need to look at it more differently. I'm not going much on this signboards. Again, there are cases which talks about signboards, neo signboards, so many things which are there. Today, nobody comes because you have a signboard. Gone are the days of signboard, somebody searches for this. Everyone is available on media on a regular basis. Represented as an agent of LIC, this was one of those days where people used to practice, in the wife's name as an agent, and there was a complaint which went through, and these are some of the cases which are there. Accept position as an auditor without following the rules of getting the no objections. There was a compliance, non-compliance, which was there. Communications required for all types of audit, fees pending of non-availability of previous auditors, non-payment of undisputed. We need to be mindful to our professional colleagues who have actually left the, who have given up their audit engagements. Just make sure that we ensure that, our professional colleagues are taken care, their fees are paid on time. And I think this is it's a very good responsibility, good practice and a responsibility on our side to make sure that our predecessor auditor, if you're taking an engagement, their audit fees are paid first, even before you accept the engagement. These are again procedural in terms of what is it, in terms of unjustified removal of auditors. This is today's term. It's very important. We need to make sure that if there is anything unjustified, you may have to report to the ICAI, and this is a very critical aspect of it. Again, these clauses talks about, receiving as you can't accept a percentage except for cooperative studies and all of this, what we'd have studied as part of SQC. Again, if chartered accountant should not be involved in organizing bills and all of that, it results into professional misconduct. There are certain restrictions in terms of when you can be promoted director. You're not supposed to play active if you've got certificate of practice. You need to keep the institute informed. All of these is a part of this, the CA Act 1949 in terms of the ethics. Employment along without the permission. There are certain case laws which are there, but they're all engaged as lecturer without permission. These, as I said, these are something which is. Second schedule again talks about the same misconduct and all of this. So this is only for more from a perspective of understanding. Taking bribes from customers, to engaging the same business by ex-client, certifying fake documents. These are some of the examples which are there. Just make sure that we are mindful about all of these. Don't hold accounts, the maintenance of accounts. Just be careful, because if the client is happy, he will always give you, saying that you are my God. The moment you're not happy with the client may go and report, he said he's holding all my books. There are cases which has went against the auditor. Just be mindful about it. It's not worth it. Non-verification of cash balance, failure to check bank balance, misconduct. These are some things which were reported and is part of the disciplinary cases. Role of chartered in relation to unlawful acts. Just be mindful. Just make sure that you take all protections, take the legal counsel, make sure that, you have all the documentation and supports with you. Appointment, this is all something which I've already spoken. There's nothing much, but if there are any questions, more than happy to take. Thank you very much. I know it's been long.
Ganesh sir, there are certain questions in the Q&A session.
Yeah. No, that's the reason I want to give that time for the Q&A, because if you allow me, I will go long. Go ahead.
Shall I read
Please.
it for you, sir?
Please.
There is a question from SSS. Most of the bankers are insisting borrowers to get signature of a chartered accountant on projected and provisional financial statements for loan sanction and loan renewal purpose. Is it permitted by ICAI?
No, please don't go there. You have no bill. You cannot certify anything about future.
Okay. So there is another question. Maybe have the PPTs, please.
This is already, in fact, I did this last time. I again share it, no problem.
Okay, sir. Okay. You share with us. We in turn will
Last
share
time
with
it is
all
there
of us.
actually.
Okay. There's one more question, sir. Dear sir, one of our clients in which we are the statutory auditors is proposing to go under voluntary liquidation. The client has requested us to assist in the liquidation process such as a surrender of registrations with IT, GST, labor laws, etc., and identification of a liquidator. Can we take up this? Will it be against the code of ethics?
No, the code of ethics, you need to identify whether it's an audit or it's an assurance. If you're an auditor, the answer is no. If it's not an audit, then it's an assurance, you can do it. Nothing prohibits you.
Any other questions from the participants? Okay, thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, Ganesh Balakrishnan, sir. We know you are an expert in IFRS, US GAAP, and auditing and assurance standards. We know you as a motivational speaker as well. And today you nailed through your presentation on code of ethics and CA profession as well. Thank you very much, sir.
Hey, there is one question which is coming through. Nowadays, my websites are mentioning CA associate service, etc. Many websites, any regulation. This exactly results into advertisement. So you can have on your own website. You can say what are this, but you cannot publish this in a media. That's all it says. You can have your own site which say, this is the firm, this is what it does, services. You're not advertising. You're only putting your website about. It doesn't have to be on this. So therefore, that is permitted. But if you're saying that on media, saying that I go there and then I publish it, that's where the issue is. Any other questions? You can unmute and ask it. Oh, there's.
Any other questions?
Mahalakshmi, your question is valid because you can put it on, they can put it on the website, but they cannot go and publish and they cannot advertise in a social media saying that we are the chartered accountants, we are the firm accountants. See, typically today what's happening, many of them are not identifying themselves whether they are a chartered accountant firm or an advisory firm. So you may have a situation where a lot of the non-chartered accountants will be saying that we provide taxation services, we provide GST services, we provide. Actually, they are advocates or non-chartered accountants. Therefore, what happens is, we all get excited the moment we see those type of people circulating. And everybody wants to know how is this non-compliance to CA. Arey Baba, that person is not at all a chartered accountant. There is a question of going into this. He is not a chartered, only if he is a chartered accountant, then he will come to. So, I think, Rahman, you should, next time when you have a session, please talk to all the central government. Advertisement should be allowed.
So, writing of articles or newsletter and publishing in social media and the link is being given to the website, is it allowed? There is a question from Yashodhan.
I think writing newsletters are all allowed. There's nothing. See, as long as you write it as chartered account, you don't write chartered accountant, this thing providing services, that becomes an advertisement. And you always say the views expressed by the is a member of the institute or as personal, does not represent. Even they also write it does not represent of the the newspaper agency or the periodical or of the institute or the institution, whatever they keep writing. So it's all personal views.
That's a extension from Mahalakshmi. Okay, at least any restriction to mentioning as ECA would help, sir.
I like that.
There's a question from Jyotsna. Sir, can a client disclose their statutory auditors in a client's official website?
No. They cannot do it. Clearly, no. That's tantamount to advertisement.
Any other questions? Delegates, any other questions, sir?
If you can unmute them, probably they may ask you question.
Yeah. If you have any questions to be asked directly to our Ganesh Balakrishnan sir, you can raise your hand in the Zoom so that we can unmute you. Shiva Ranjani, you can ask your question.
You have to unmute. Ask the IT guy to unmute. You have to ask DLH SIRC to unmute.
So they have to unmute and speak up.
No, if you are the co-host, just look at it. What would happen? You would have muted everyone. If you're the
Relevant, can you unmute Shiva Ranjani?
Yeah, I have unmuted, sir.
But it's still showing as muted.
You can unmute her.
They have muted, sir.
Okay.
Shivaranjani, or else you can type in your questions in the Q&A session. Sir, there is a question from Giri Kumar. Hello, sir. Do we need to report in audit report about observations of non-compliance of other accounts or any other way? And other acts or any other way?
Report in audit report, observation of non-compliance with other acts or any other. No, see, non-compliance of acts, see, what it relates to compliance to financial statement. That means, let's say, I have a pollution non-compliance. I give it, give me a pollution license app lapsed, or non-maintenance of this, which, or non-payment of minimum wages act, or non-agreement to any of the gratuity. Now, if that non-compliance results into financial impact, you do that. Or because of the pollution control decision to close the factory, it gets straight away into a going concern issue. Then you report that.
There's a question from Rupa Srikanth. What about doing some educational programs apart from regular work?
Nobody stops you from doing educational program as long as you only say that you only say it's a CA. You don't say you're a firm partner. You're only doing an education program for that. But if you hold a certificate of practice, there's a maximum that you can do in a week. So just be within that.
So there is a question from Aarti. In case the audit fee is long outstanding, is there any implications on continuing the audit?
Absolutely. Your fees itself is not paid. You should not even be with the client. It's a clear issue. You tell me on what, how can you do something when your own payment is not, should you not then question the cash balance of that person who's holding or the transaction that person is doing? I think we have to, you go to a doctor, what do? First he collects consultation, then only you can enter. Unfortunately, in auditing, what happens, whatever you collect, it results into a conflict because you're low on advance, something like this. Somewhere you need to get your money, without which you should not. I think any client which does not pay you, better to leave the client. Because of the next incumbent auditor, when he comes, he should make sure, and if it comes under the professional ethics, if it does not get your fees done, it runs into a problem. That's the other way to get your fees.
So there is a continuation of question from Rupa Srikanth. What about doing some educational programs apart from on YouTube? Is it allowed?
That's why I said YouTube, again, you can do it. You can have a personal channel that is permitted. As I said, do it in such a way, it does not take more than X number of hours. Restrict to the numbers. Don't use, you see a lot of chartered accountants do it, right? For the CA students, they do it. It's quite common. Nothing stops you as long as you don't use your firm's name. You don't say that I'm a CA, member of this thing. Nothing stops you. You are only a chartered accountant who's doing it. But if that is and if you have got a COP and that is your main source of your income, then run into a problem.
Any other questions, delegates? No questions. Shall we take that way? No questions. All your doubts are clarified by Ganesh sir. Okay. So with that, we have come to the conclusion of today's program. Thank you, Ganesh sir. Thank you for your valuable time and presence. With that, we have come to the conclusion of today's program, and we will be back with some other program. There is a special program on World Earth Day by SIRC on 22nd April 2023. That is supposed to be the World Earth Day. We are celebrating World Earth Day by having a program on the topic sustainability reporting by Dr. K.K. Upadhyaya. Please kindly join with us in conserving our earth. And until then, from all of us here, good night. Good night, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Good night.